4-month-old typical atypical motor development side by side. In this video, you will see a typically developing baby and an atypically developing baby in 8 different positions. Use this to help recognize early motor delays. Please remember to adjust for prematurity. Position 1. Supine. Head and body position. The typically developing baby on the left is able to hold his head in midline and has symmetry of the head, eyes, arms, and legs, while the atypically developing baby on the right has asymmetry of the head and extremities. His head is tilted and body curved like the letter C. Presented a toy. When baby on the left is presented a toy, he shows visual engagement, reaches against gravity, and explores toys with both hands. The atypically developing baby on the right is not visually engaged. He does not track the toy. He does move his arms but does not lift his shoulders off the surface. Extremities. Notice the typically developing baby has frequent anti-gravity movements and extremity movement disassociated from a stable trunk, while baby on the right has random movements and not much anti-gravity movement. Position 2. Side lying. Head and trunk. Baby on the left is able to lift his head and upper trunk off the surface in preparation for independent rolling. Baby on the right cannot lift his head and upper trunk off the support surface. Posture. Notice typically developing baby on the left can sustain this posture with a balance of trunk flexor and extensor muscles, while baby on the right is unable to sustain this posture because he lacks balance of trunk flexors and extensors. Extremities. Baby on the left is able to use upper arms and disassociated lower extremities to assist in facilitated roll. Baby on the right exhibits sluggishness in his top arm during the facilitated roll. Position 3. Prone. Head lifting. Typically developing baby moves his arms forward to reach for an object and turns his head freely. Atypically developing baby uses only neck extension to turn his head. Instead of forearm weight bearing, his head lifting is unsustained. Elbows and shoulders. Baby on the left can bring his shoulders and upper arms forward with elbows in front of the shoulders. Baby on the right keeps his hips flexed, which shifts weight forward, keeping his elbows well behind shoulders. Lower extremities. Baby on the left shows progression toward lower extremity extension and adduction. Baby on the right does not have the capability to shift weight onto his lower extremities. Position 4. Pull to sit. Head. Typically developing baby maintains his head in midline with no head lag and good chin tuck. Atypically developing baby demonstrates head lag throughout maneuver. He cannot sustain head lifting once upright. Assisting in maneuver. Baby on the left pulls forward with both arms and abdominals to assist in the maneuver. Baby on the right does not pull with his arms or upper extremities. Position 5. Sitting. Head. Baby on the left has good head control and chin tuck with head in the midline, and he is able to turn his head in all directions. Baby on the right does not sustain head lifting in this position and cannot turn his head or look side to side with control. Vision. Notice the typically developing baby is able to visually fixate on and begins to track a toy. The atypically developing baby is unable to use his vision in this posture. Support. Typically developing baby's body needs support only at the hips and pelvis. He has extension up to the mid-thoracic spine. Atypically developing baby needs support at his upper arms and shoulders with maximum assistance to maintain this position. In sitting, we see the typically developing baby moving into anterior and posterior planes, reach for toys, then returns to sit. The atypically developing baby uses extremity posturing to compensate for decreased proximal strength in sitting. Position 6. Horizontal suspension. Head. The typically developing baby is able to keep neck and trunk extended with his head upright 45 degrees and hold it steady in the midline. In this position, the atypically developing baby can only hold his head up briefly and cannot maintain extension or midline position. Trunk. In horizontal suspension, the typically developing baby has good trunk extension with scapular adduction and is able to freely move his arms and legs. The atypically developing baby is unable to maintain trunk extension while moving his arms and legs. Position 7. Protective extension. Upper extremity response. The typically developing baby is using his arms to help sustain trunk extension. He cannot bring them forward into a full protective response, which should be present by 6 months. Notice the atypically developing baby uses excessive asymmetry and keeps his arms closer to his chest to sustain neck and trunk extension. Extension. The baby on the left has good extension through the neck, trunk, and hips during forward movement. The atypically developing baby on the right is unable to sustain neck, trunk, and hip extension during the forward movement. Position 8. Standing. Posture. Typically developing baby can maintain his head in midline and is able to move freely. He keeps his hips just behind his shoulders and ankles in plantar flexion. Notice the atypically developing baby achieves head lifting using neck extension. His hips are well behind his shoulders, and he intermittently flexes at the hips and knees. Activity in lower extremity and trunk. The typically developing baby demonstrates active extension into lower thoracic and lumbar spine and no full hip extension, while the atypically developing baby lacks adequate hip and trunk control for sustained supported standing.